Good afternoon, everyone. Today, our group is going to present our topic, comparative analysis of the development levels and human capital in 4 representative U.S. states, California, Texas, Florida, and New York. This is our agenda. Our group is divided for these 5 parts. Now let's move to part 1. Let me explain why we select these 4 states. California, Texas, Florida, and New York were chosen because they show clear difference in economic scale, labor force structure, and educational attainment. Therefore, they are useful as contrasting cases for comparisons. In other words, our aim is not to represent the whole United States, but to compare different development patterns within one consistent framework. Now I move to our research questions. We mainly ask for questions about GDP and labor market differences and the role of education, development models, and the key variables that distinguish the 4 states. Now let's talk about why this project is important. First, this study goes beyond simple summary because we also use machine learning methods to explore deeper patterns in the data. Second, the hidden pattern can be found through open government data. Third, our timeline includes COVID-19 periods, so we can see how these states recover from this major shock. Finally, although this study only focused on these 4 states, this more focused comparison still provides meaningful insights. Next, this slide shows our data sets. To make sure our study is reliable, we use official U.S. federal data, which from these 3 government data website. Next, I will explain the data pre-processing. We converted the raw data into the state year panel structure and standardize the unit into millions, merge the data sets, and finally check the data quality through orange data mining. Finally, this slide shows our methodology and main tool. Our workflow includes 5 parts: data pre-processing and exploratory analysis, or regression models, classification, clustering, and PCA. And orange data mining was the main tool used by the whole group. So with the data prepared and the methodology clearly defined, now I will pass the presentation to my group mate for the next sessions.
In the part of the exploratory data analysis and results, first, we will do the analysis of economic and employment dimensions. From the perspective of economic dimensions, to understand and evaluate the macroeconomic performance of California, Texas, Florida, and New York, we utilized Orange to visualize data across different dimensions. This allows us to conduct a comparative analysis and review the evolutionary trends of GDP and personal income. In the data pre-processing workflow, we use select columns to pre-process the variables, and real GDP median and real personal income median were selected as features, while state and year were assigned as meta-attributes, which is better for the grouping in visualization. During the workflow, we have 4 different kinds of visualizations, which are distributions, box plot, scatter plot, and heat map. First, we use distribution to identify the economic levels of different regions and find which state has the highest output and income. Through the visualization, we found that the economic level of California is the highest, which has the highest GDP and personal income every year. Also, the ranking of GDP levels of the 4 states are consistent with those of personal income, which is California, Florida, New York, and finally Texas. After the comparison of the aggregate GDP and personal income, we further use box plot to explore the stability of wealth. Through this visualization, we can see that although California has the highest GDP and personal income, it also has a wider gap between its figures in different years, which means IQR. In contrast, New York's GDP and personal income are both highly concentrated because of the lower standard deviation. Therefore, compared with other states, New York shows a high stability and predictability of the level of economy. Then, we use scatter plot to show the development of economy of these four states. The chart shows that the four states all have the trend of going up from 2015 to 2023, both GDP and personal income. The special point is that from 2019 to 2021, the personal income of California has a significant increase, but it declined next year. Finally, the purpose of the heat map is to examine the relationship between GDP and personal income. Through the map, we can see that the intensity of colors in GDP and personal income of the same state is almost the same. For example, California shows bright yellow for GDP, and its personal income also shows bright color. Therefore, it shows that the level of economic performance is closely linked to the living standard of people. In conclusion, for these four states, California has the largest economic volume, New York has the most stable economic level, and for the whole economy, there is a strong correlation between GDP and personal income of the residents. Next, from the perspective of employment dimensions, to investigate the comparison of employment rates across the four states, we built up another data preprocessing workflow to select other data to do the visualization. This time, we chose the data of employment as our research subject. First, we use distributions to do the analysis. The visualization shows that Texas and New York have higher employment rates than the other two states. Another important point is that the results of Texas and New York are highly concentrated within a narrow range. Therefore, these two states also have excellent working environments and remain consistent over the years. To better understand the stability of the labor markets in the four states, we use box plot for dispersion analysis. The data shows that Texas and New York have the most compact distribution, and the IQR is only 0.8. But the number of California and Florida is larger, which are both 1. Therefore, the stability of job markets in Texas and New York is higher. In conclusion, from the perspective of employment and job markets, Texas and New York have the highest employment rate and also the most stable job market.
Next, we will conduct a descriptive analysis to research how educational standards in 4 major U.S. states influence GDP and employment rates. First, we perform a descriptization and categorize education bachelor, education high school, and real GDP million into 3 levels: high, median, and low. Next, set the objectives. Target is real GDP, feature is bachelor and high school, mentor is state and year. And it's about model testing and performance. We tested 3 models: logistic regression, random forest, and decision tree. Random forest performed the best. It's the winner, with high accuracy score of 0.918 AUC and 0.806 CA. The key insight is that because random forest works best, it shows that the link between education and the economy is complex and not linear, likely influenced by regional and social factors. Then it's about nomogram, about the bachelor's degree. Area with over 34.95% college graduates shows a strong positive impact on the economy. Area below 31.5% contribute very little to economic growth. And the high school degree having a very high percentage, over 87.5% of only high school graduates, correlations with lower economic performance. So the higher the proportion of bachelor's degree holders, the stronger the economy. Having more high school graduates won't improve the economy. And next is visual analysis on employment. It's about trend. Our scatter plot shows a clear negative correlation. The higher education level, the lower unemployment rate. And there is the 2020 COVID impact. Can see a massive spike in the data for 2020. Unemployment should graduate across all states due to the pandemic. California and New York were hit hardest, reaching nearly 10% unemployment. Finally, it's summary of results. The degree matters. High concentrations of bachelor's degree lead to better GDP and job stability, and high school isn't enough. Relying only on high school education does not ensure economic growth, while education helps outsider shocks like COVID-19 can still influence the labor markets.
First, we use classification analysis to identify different economic development levels. This is a supervised method based on GDP-defined levels.
This section focuses on using classification learning to evaluate the economic development level of different states. Specifically, we aim at classifying states into high and low economic levels based on 4 features: undergraduate enrollment rate, high school enrollment rate, employment rate, and unemployment rate. In this part, I mainly did 3 things. First, evaluating classification model performance. Second, identifying the most important feature. And third, analyzing which states are more likely to be classified as high economic level under one typical model. On the right, you can see the overall orange workflow, which shows the full process from data classification to model evaluation and prediction. Before building the model, we first define the target variable. We use the median GDP to divide the data into high and low economic levels. In orange, I used discretize with equal frequency to split the data, and then use edit domain to label values, those below the median as low and the above as high. The median is chosen since it is less affected by outliers, which makes the classification more stable. Next, I compared 3 classification models: logistic regression, decision tree, and random forest. These models were selected because they represent different types of approaches: linear, nonlinear, and ensemble methods. Decision tree and random forests are not sensitive to data scaling, and the logistic regression and decision tree offer relatively high interpretability from the results. The decision tree performs best overall. It achieved the highest classification accuracy and F1 score, both reaching 0.833. Looking at the confusion matrix, decision tree correctly classified more observations and shows stronger diagonal dominance, meaning fewer misclassifications. To see different features contributions in classification, I used select columns to define the features and target, and then use rank to evaluate their importance based on information gain. The results shows that high school enrollment rate is the most important feature with the highest information gain. This means it is the most important feature in distinguishing between high and low economic levels compared with the other 3 features. Finally, I conducted state-level prediction analysis using the decision tree model. By linking select columns and tree model to predictions, I examined how different states are classified. The results show that California and Texas are more likely to be classified as high economic level. For example, California is classified as high in all cases, while Texas shows a relatively high proportion as well. On the other hand, Florida and New York are more likely to be classified as low economic level. However, it is important to note that these predictions are based on the same data set used for training, so they mainly reflect the model's fitting pattern rather than true predictive performance on new data.
Now let's utilize clustering and PCA to do the analysis and try to answer the research question: which variables best distinguish the 4 states? Here is the orange flow. Our data covers 4 states over 9 years, 36 observations total, to ensure fair comparison across different features like GDP medians and education percentages. Our variables were z-score standardized. So after the aggregate columns and z-score standardization, we use 3 methods. We can see here. PCA to identify key variables, k-means for scale-based grouping, and hierarchical clustering for structural similarity. And from seeing these 2 plots, we can see that k-means also look California alone as a group because its economic scale is simply in a different league, while hierarchical clustering pairs California with Texas and Florida with New York. Actually, it isn't a contradiction because k-means is sensitive to absolute size, and hierarchical clustering captures overall structural similarity. Together, they tell us that California is uniquely large, but its growth pattern resembles Texas more than we might expect.
And we use Sellerhood analysis to see how confident are we in the k=2 split. The overall Sellerhood score is 0.45, in a reasonable range. California's cluster score 0.518, meaning it's well separated and stable. The other 3 states score 0.373, with 1 borderline point. This data honestly reflects that mid-sized states do have overlapping economic characteristics, especially during recovery periods. The clustering is statistically valid while acknowledging natural ambiguity.
And through the PCA analysis, we finally find that PCA reviews would actually drive the differences. In this PCA plot, we can see that the first 3 components explain 99.3 of variance, so we can effectively reduce 8 variables to 3 dimensions. But actually, we can see the scatter plot of PC1 against PC2 reveal uneven spatial separation, while plots of PC1 against PC3 deliver clear resolution. So we analyze that PC1 captures economic scale, PC2 reflects year-to-year employment fluctuations, and PC3 is driven by bachelor's degree attainment. And we can see that PC3 actually separates New York from Texas, where New York leads at 40.6%, Texas shows at 34.2%. So beyond this algorithm, we find that the key distinguishing variables operate hierarchically. Economic scale indicators like GDP, personal income, population, labor force, like this, captured by PC1, primarily isolate California, where human capital structure like bachelor's degree, captured by PC3, fundamentally differentiates New York from Texas. And we also summarize the state developmental typologies. New York is knowledge intensive. Texas is more labor expansion driven. California leads on scale but is internally diverse, and Florida maintains a solid educational baseline.
Take a conclusion and limitations. It's about conclusion. Economic success across U.S. states does not follow a single model, but rather is the result of the combined effects of different development pathways. States where over 35% of people have a bachelor's degree see higher GDP and lower unemployment, like New York. And talent is key. Basic education provides stability, like Florida, but high-end talent is the real engine for growth. California holds an advantage due to its massive economic scale. New York and Texas follow different development paths, with their economic growth primarily driven by population size and industrial scale. And its research limits. First is macro view. We looked at states as a whole, not specific cities, and external factors. Things like Texas and people moving also play a huge role, but wasn't in this data. And there are COVID gap. The pandemic 2020 to 2021 temporarily disrupted the normal link between education and jobs. And this is our reference page. Thank you for listening.